So in your book, you talk about conservation quite a lot, obviously, and cover lots of different subjects to do with that. But you refer to it as the conservation industry. So why do you refer to it as that?
Well, it is an industry. I mean, it turns over a couple of £1 billion a year. I mean, they refer to the shooting industry. To me, shooting isn't an industry, it's a way of life. I've run a shoot for 25 years. I've never got a penny for it. People subscribe to a syndicate and we wash our face, it balances, but it's not an industry. Now, if you turn it on its head and look at what they're doing, RSPB, for example, I think it was 142 million. They made a profit of 22 million. They don't call it a profit because they're not-for-profit organisations. They call it a surplus. But if you know, a rose rather than any other name would smell as sweet. And so, if this isn't industry, what is it? It's a big bucks business. And people are making a lot of money out of it. Individual people are being paid lots of money to run it. It's an industry. And like any industry, it seeks to get its market share. And it will, God help you if you stand in the way. And it seeks to find issues that it can promote itself with. And so, unfortunately, in a lot of it, we're in the meat grinder. You know.
And I think talking about the conservation industry, there's certain things that I've witnessed in the last year, one of which being, you know, there's some hen harriers nested near here, heavily protected, people patrolling the roads, stopping gamekeepers who work on this estate, you know, telling them off, having a go at them, cameras being placed on the nest, cameras being placed 500 metres away from the nest, people sitting in the skyline with night vision goggles, everything. It was crazy. I didn't realise how intense a hen harrier nest is. And then in contrast, a mile down the road, you have lapwings, curlews and golden plovers nesting in a field, and a farmer harrowed his field with nests in. So how is that allowed to happen?
Well, you have to face the fact that there's a sort of avian apartheid. That all birds are important, but some are more important than others.
This is what I've learned.
And for some reason, the raptors, in general, hen harriers in particular, have a effect on the conservation industry that other birds don't seem to have. Now, I'm not saying they're not interested in curlews, but they, for example, if you take curlews, they won't do what is necessary to maintain the curlew population in most places because they won't do effective predator control. For whatever, I mean, we can go around the houses with that. At a meeting on Dartmoor, the then chief executive of RSPB was challenged on it, and he said, by a friend of mine, and he said, well, we won't do it because it'll upset our members in terms. I was with senior RSPB people talking about stoats on Orkney when they first got there, and I suggested using fen traps and a professionally trained gamekeeper to eradicate them while there were still a few. And they said, no, we're going to use cage traps because we don't want to kill them. We're going to take them back to the mainland and let them go. And I said, well, I thought you said it was an important and challenging thing. And they said, yes, it is. And I said, well, why are you using the least efficient method to solve the problem when you could be using the most efficient method to solve the problem? And they said, you don't understand, you would upset our members. Now, at some point, there has to be a balance between upsetting the members and saving the birds.
And getting the job
done. But the thing with hen harriers is quite extraordinary. I mean, it's extraordinary in a different way too, because this year has been the most successful year for hen harriers that there's been probably in the last 30, 40 years, certainly 40 years. And who knows? You know, if you read the bird crime, RSPB bird crime thing that came out a couple of weeks ago, that doesn't appear in there at all. So nothing justifies raptor persecution, but it is equally unjustified to not give the right context. The context is of hen harrier population in England going up.
Yeah.
If you then look at another document which came out last week, which is the review of the situation in Ireland with hen harriers, they had a catastrophic breeding year.
Yeah.
And what worries me is if the conservation industry gets its way, we will see something that looks like Ireland. So in Ireland, you've got no grouse shooting at all, no grouse moor keepers. You've got miles and miles of unmanaged heather, and miles of unmanaged in-by land and moorland.
Yeah.
You've got more and more trees being planted. Those are the reasons why there are no hen harriers.
Yeah.
The hen harriers are doing badly, plus the bad weather. That's what the plan is for this lot.
Yeah.
That is what the plan is. You get rid of the gamekeepers, you stop managing the heather, you plant more trees. Now, they've done that in Ireland, and the hen harriers are going down the plug hole.
Yeah. Exactly.
So let's do it here. You can put all the cameras on your nest you like. If trees grow up it, in 5 years' time, it won't be there.
Yeah.
So when they planted Kielder Forest, there was a burgeoning of hen harriers because it was short trees full of voles.
Yeah.
Once the canopy closes after 15 years, there's no hen harriers don't live in a wood.
Exactly.
And having a wood adjacent is bad enough because the foxes and crows and ravens that nest and live in the wood come out and predate the nest.
Yeah.
Everybody, it's sort of a thing's got up that the only reason a hen harrier dies is it's been killed by a gamekeeper.
Yeah.
No. You know, at Langham, the best years that the hen harriers ever had were when you've got 5 keepers working flat out.
Yeah.
And within a few years there won't be any hen harriers on Langham.
Yeah.
Believe me. Now it's in community ownership. And I wish the community ownership well. I think they're lovely people and should succeed. But I doubt very much if they'll be employing 5 gamekeepers. I doubt if they'll be employing 1.
Yeah.
And without management, these things do not happen.
Exactly.
And without interventions, I'm sure the farmer didn't particularly want to do that. But if you want to achieve things, talk to the farmer, give him some money so he can afford to not do what you don't want him to do.
Yeah.
And it'll work.
Exactly. So following on from that, when you do get a hen harrier nest on your estate or on your moor, you have to report it to either the RSPB or Natural England. So you have to tell them that it's there. And they will come and they will place the camera on and they will tell you what you need to do, and usually the parents now have trackers on already. So they'll identify those birds, tell you where they've come from, their nests, everything. Which is quite interesting. But why is the GWCT not an option there? Why do you have to report it to either of them two?
Because they're besties. Well, the first thing is I'm not entirely sure you have to report to the RSPB at all.
Okay.
But if you report it nationally, and RSPB will be made aware of it.
Yeah.
So, and the wise thing to do is to tell people it's there, because if they find out you haven't told them, they'll suspect the worst.
This was the thing on this estate. It was noticed. You know, people know what a hen harrier looks like, and there's a lot of people who reported it already. So,
and there is no reason why RSPB have to be involved in everything, any more than the RSPCA has to be involved in everything. It's customer practice, and as far as I'm aware, everything that happens around the nest has to be licensed.
Yeah.
Although there appears to be a different system with some things with RSPB, in that they seem to have, I haven't got to the bottom of it yet, but they seem to have a sort of general license that they can make their own decisions. But if you're the estate, then almost everything you do within a certain proximity of the nest is monitored and everything.
Yeah.
And that's what Natural England wants to do. And as I've said before, they are the arbiters of everything.
Yeah.
They make the rules, they decide how they're enforced, they decide whether they're broken, they decide what the penalty is. So you'd be mad not to engage with Natural England. They choose to use RSPB, then they choose to use it. It's even stranger than that, in that there's been some research done into curlews, which was co-funded with Natural England and RSPB, which was to look at the balance between habitat and predation. Can you adjust the habitat so the predation pressure isn't so bad? If you control the predators, is that going to have an effect? And Natural England chose to use RSPB, in spite of the fact that RSPB have no track record that I'm aware of being able to produce large numbers of curlews anywhere. and they've no track record anywhere of being particularly good at predator control.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, GWCT ran the Otterburn study and ran the Salisbury Plains study and has run lots of studies where they've successfully controlled predators in a legal and humane way and have been able to compare the changes in population and breeding success through that route.
Yeah.
But they didn't use them, they used the RSPB.
Yeah.
Now I think that's borderline weird. I mean, it's why go to somebody that's not very good at it?
Yeah.
Just because they like birds. I mean, if you're really interested in finding out does predator control work with curlews as opposed to habitat manipulation, go to the people that can do predator control successfully and have proved that it works. The other weird thing is that we already know the answer.
Yeah.
The Otterburn study showed beyond all peradventure that if you don't control common predators legally and humanely, the curlew population will decline.
Yeah.
And repeats itself across Philip Merrick's down in Kent. It's exactly the same. He was getting 1.1 chicks per pair from lapwing on ground where predators were controlled. RSPB was getting 0.11 per pair. His was over-sustainable, theirs was crashing to the floor.
Yeah.
The problem then becomes, of course, this other problem that you've got with waders in particular, but absence of predator control and reserves, is they create a wader sink. So all the wader, you create perfect habitat, but you do nothing about the foxes, crows and stoats. But then all the waders come and nest in and they will get eaten.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, over there's somebody that's hasn't got the habitat, don't spend a fortune on the habitat, it's all right habitat.
Yeah.
If they nested over there, where he does control the foxes, crows and stoats, they'd have actually produced some chicks.
Yeah.
It's reached a point in the north of England where it's probable that without grouse moor management, even the curlews that aren't breeding on grouse moors would not be able to sustain themselves because they're probably their populations are probably being refreshed by birds that are bred on the grouse moors.
Yeah.
So this is it's so tragic. It's hardly believable that you can have all this resource poured into one bird which is actually doing better and better, although ironically, thanks to a system, brood management, that the people that are pouring the money, want the money poured in, have been trying to wreck, which is disgraceful. When you've got other birds where we know what they need, which is humane and legal predator control of common predators, but you won't do that because you don't like it.
Yeah. And a lot of people say to me when I have this conversation with them, well, you know, for millions of years nothing was managed. For millions of years people didn't manage predators. But what I always say to them is, you know, like you said, there's now 67 million people in England. You know, the grouse moors are tiny pockets of wildlife and we are vast throughout England. We've taken away all of their habitat, we've taken away their places where they could spread out and there might be less predation because they're more spread out and there's more space for them. So that's all gone now.
I think Emily, that's absolutely spot on. I'd go even further than that. The people, the 67 million people is a problem.
Yeah.
But it's a multifaceted problem. And if you go back into if you try and say, well, this didn't happen when there were no people here, so why should it happen now?
Yeah.
Well, there are people here, for God's sake.
Yeah. And
there's not just one or two, there's 67 million of them.
Exactly.
But that 67 million have all sorts of effects. So if you take large gulls, lesser blackback gulls, herring gulls, there are now large colonies of these gulls. There's 140,000 lesser blackbacks, I think. Let's take them as an example. There's a huge colony in Boland, a huge colony down over there. And that colony exists because of people.
Yeah.
It's simply that they can scavenge tons and tons of food within a flying distance of that. That colony has a catastrophic effect on the habitat because of the droppings, catastrophic effect on water quality because of the droppings, and it has a catastrophic effect on the wildlife because they eat them. In a wilderness, would that colony exist? No. Because the first brown bear that wandered up there in June would eat them.
Yeah.
He would go in one end and he'd munch his way through and he'd come out the other end.
Yeah. And
gulls are not idiotic. They don't nest where they're going to be eaten, so they go somewhere else.
Yeah.
That would be an offshore island where they would, the numbers would decline to be accommodated. So we have created this problem.
Yeah.
And we better deal with it.
Yeah.
Otherwise, there's another problem going to go. So it's just the whole problem with rewilding is not rewilding or wilding. We can do that. It's that it creates an excuse for people to think they can walk away with hands in their pockets.
Yeah.
It's nothing to do with me, Gov. You know, I'm not responsible for the south side of Forest of Bolton being trashed by seagulls.
Yeah.
But you bloody well are.
Which is a huge part. I mean, gulls especially, like you say, you know, we protected them so that they couldn't be controlled in many places. Their populations have gone crazy because there was lots of tips or kind of rubbish areas where they could feed. The fish in the sea have now lessened, but we're also cleaning up our land and trying to clean up our tips and things. So where do they naturally go? Well, they naturally go over the moors.
Yeah.
I've watched it so many times this year, gulls just tracking back and forth across these places, and when they find chicks, there's nothing you can do.
They're superb generalist predators. You're absolutely right. I mean, they are.
They're intense to watch when you see them.
Terrible things.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, if they weren't, well, I don't know. The problem you've got with it is that it's the gull population in my lifetime has gone up and up and up. It's now started to drop a bit, but it's still probably 600-700% more than it was.
Yeah.
Now, so all of a sudden the herring gull population has dropped. So it's now red listed.
Yeah.
It's evidence that the red listing system is bonkers.
Mm-hmm.
You've got 150,000 pairs of herring gulls and it's red listed, is it?
Yeah.
And they're eating curlews, there's 16,000 pairs of them.
Yeah.
And you can't kill one of them because it's red listed.
Mm.
And you can't, but to protect one of them, there's 10 of those for every one of those.
Yeah.
And not only that, they produce 3 chicks every year, they produce none because they've eaten them.
Yeah.
It is madness, just madness. And it's even bigger madness than that because what people don't understand or won't understand is that predator control is a local business. When a gamekeeper needs to kill large gulls to protect ground nesting birds, they do not set out to control the population, national population of large gulls.
No.
That would be mad. What they do is to stop them killing the stuff on their ground. You don't even have to kill that many. If you just kill a few, the rest think, God, this isn't very safe, I'll go somewhere else.
That's the thing, like you say, they're very switched on birds anyway, so they, you know,
Soon
one
get the
gets
message.
killed, they move off.
Yeah. And there's no need to speculate that because when the population was increasing exponentially, gamekeepers, they were all on the general licence, gamekeepers were killing them, the Nature Conservancy Council was killing them, RSPB was killing them, a lot of the nature trusts, everybody was killing them.
Yeah.
But it didn't stop the population going up.
Mm-hmm.
So there is no doubt that you could kill quite large numbers of gulls locally without having any effect on the population.
Yeah.
They don't breed till they're 4 years old.
Mm.
There's people not allowed to kill gulls miles and miles, hundreds of miles from a breeding colony.
Yeah.
So you don't interfere with breeding gulls. Well, what are they doing here then?
Yeah.
You know, they're not going to go home.
Mm-hmm.
Now, if that's still eggs, it's got an 8-hour flight back.
Yeah.
It's mad.
I think that's what I struggle with, especially after the last year of kind of watching on the moors, is kind of the injustice of one bird is more important than the other. You know, like you said, one is in the 100,000s, one is in the 10,000s, and they're equal somehow in their conservation. Yeah.
And one eats the other.
Yeah. So thank you so much for today. I think just asking all of these questions and getting all of this information out there will help people have a bit more hope and be a bit more positive about the shooting community and the shooting industry. I think I would definitely recommend for anyone involved or not involved to read this book. I mean, it was just a great read, to be honest. I really enjoyed it. I enjoyed all the facts. I read it pretty quickly. It's an easy read. You can get it on audio as well, which is great. So yeah, I just want to say thank you for coming and doing this interview with me.
You're more than welcome, and if it gives people hope, that's not ill-founded. It isn't ill-founded. What that book purports to do tries to do, amongst other things, is give people in these hills a voice.
Yeah.
So every chapter starts with something people have told me.
Which it definitely does. I found that. I think it was just nice to read something that, for me personally, I grew up in that community, surrounded by grouse moors. I do live in a very pretty place, which I'm very lucky to live there. And to read something that actually was true, factual, gave you a voice was brilliant.
Good. Thank you.
Yes, thank you.
Thanks a lot. And keep up the good work.
Yeah, you too.